welcome back to another round of Basis Picks. Now this is actually going to be a little bit different to the normal ones. I not too long ago came back from the actual public weigh-in for Anthony Joshua versus Jermaine Franklin at Westfield in Shepherd's Bush. Yeah, it was a pretty good turnout. Met some good people. I have to give a big shout out to Yemi.x, one of my subscribers. I think they found me after me doing something with Ade. I think the guy's name, his name is also Ade, so shout outs to you. I did say I'd give you a shout out on this one. I met a few other people, loads of people was coming up to me, you know, oh yeah, Base the Kid, we recognize you from Undefeated or Ade or your channel. I was like, okay, so the name's getting out there. Shout out to October Red as well. She was, you know, getting busy doing her thing. I saw she got some pretty juicy interviews and some behind the scenes stuff, which she may or may not share with you guys in the future. But yeah, the reason I say this one's going to be a little different to normal is because usually I'll kind of go through the cards that are out there and give my predictions on a plethora of the fights that is taking place. On this one, I'm not really going to do that. The Anthony Joshua card, I'm going to be real, ever since like Craig Richards dropped off with the Bolotniks fight, and now you kind of got the Felix Cash, you know, that's dropped off as well. The card itself has got good fights on it, but it's not as strong as it was. So really and truly, it's the co-main and the main event that's the talking points. But what I'm going to do in this one, I'm not necessarily going to give predictions for the other fights. I'm just going to talk about some of the things that I saw. So for instance, Galal Yafai's moved a week up on schedule from when he was supposed to be fighting. The only good thing about that is both him and his opponent had to cut the same amount of weight to make the fight a week earlier. So that shouldn't, in theory, put any damage to him or you know, any undue pressure on him or whatever. I see it being the case that whatever was going to happen next week will happen this week, because both of them are in the exact same position. It's not like one person had to end up cutting like 15 pounds in a week and the other person only had to cut like 4 or something. They both, I believe, compete at the same weight, so they would have been in the same position. So yeah, not too much to necessarily go on with regards to that. In terms of Fabio Wardley and Michael Polite Coffey, now Mike Coffey isn't actually that bad of a boxer. I feel like he was derailed by Jonathan Rice obviously just stepping up the levels too soon. I know some people would think of Jonathan as like a journeyman, but he's always been better than that. He just kind of had a bit of a raw deal towards the start of his career. He didn't necessarily start off on the right foot, but I've always said it, for a big guy, he's probably one of the most technically sound and athletically gifted guys, if he would just, you know, be able to keep the weight down, keep focused on boxing. But you know, sometimes when you don't have boxing as a full outlet, those kind of things happen. But he basically derailed the Mike Polite Coffey train, and since then Coffey has had a victory and then had a loss in his last fight, but now he's managing to go for, I think it's a WBA Continental, it's a vacant title at heavyweight with Fabio Wardley. So seeing them both on the scales, Coffey was just under 270 pounds. And Fabio weighed in at about 242. To me, that's a concern. And I say that because if you look at Fabio Wardley just as a person, that yeah, he is a big guy, but he's not 242 pounds big. If you look at his frame, if he really wanted to, he could be a cruiserweight. Like, he could legitimately get down to about 200 pounds. And if not 200 safely, 205, you know, 210 sort of, and be comfortable. So he's got weight on him that is not necessarily natural to his frame as it stands. And he's been steadily going up in weight for the last couple of years. And in that, I've noticed his legs haven't been moving as quickly as they used to. I mean, yeah, his punch power doesn't like it's changed much, if I'm gonna be honest. Like, he still seems, he was a big, he was a pretty big puncher then, accurate puncher. That hasn't really changed much, but he seems to have gotten a bit slower. Now, the problem is, when you get slower at heavyweight, you get easier to hit. And he's already a person that seems like he needs to get hit in order to switch on to a fight. He starts very slow, starts cold, and then sort of just goes for it after a certain period of time. The slower you get, the less you're going to be able to ride those shots and take a little bit off of each individual shot as it's coming to you. So while I don't think that Coffee is going to be the person to exploit that, that doesn't bode well for me personally moving forward with Fabio. Also, even though Coffee was stopped by Jonathan Rice in their first fight, it was an on the feet stoppage by the ref, so it wasn't like knocked out cold or laid out cold, so he's pretty durable. So yeah, I kind of see this one getting points, as long as Fabio doesn't, what's the word I'm looking for, like basically overload himself in the first half of the fight. Like, as long as he doesn't necessarily go for broke and he keeps it steady, he probably realizes, all right, I'm not necessarily going to just be able to one punch this guy out of here. I'm just going to have to go through the rounds, go through the motions and work things out. Now look, things can happen. Again, the ref can jump in and stop a fight at any given time. That is always a possibility, but I definitely would not be I wouldn't be surprised to see this one go points. But yeah, okay, so talking outside of that, let's talk about the main event for this card, which is obviously Anthony Joshua versus Jermaine Franklin. So I saw Jermaine Franklin, and he definitely is back to a shape that he was actually in, I guess, post 2019. He used to compete around about sort of the 230 mark, the 220 to 230 mark, and it was only more recently he ended up in sort of like the 240s or 250s. So you can tell that naturally he's not really supposed to be that size either. But this can work in one of two ways, because it's been about 5 months since his previous fight where he was in the 240s, I believe. No, he was in the 250s, like the high 250s, and you can see that obviously weight's dropped off of him at this point. However, we don't know if it was a case of weight just naturally coming off bit by bit or due to heavy excess training. And if that's the case, because they did say he's been training ever since that fight, didn't really take a break. Now, if that's the case, that can then, while your body's now trying to adjust to this new size, it can make you a bit weaker. It can make your punch resistance just that little bit, that little bit less. And in the heat of battle, when you maybe need that extra additional shock absorption or, muscle or fat even, just to sort of give your body a bit more sturdiness, you might not have that. He will have enhanced speed in his legs, possibly, but I don't think that his actual shots are going to be any heavier with the weight loss. If anything, they may be a little bit faster, but I don't think he's actually going to hit harder than he was hitting before. And to be totally honest, he was not the biggest of punchers. Anthony Joshua, on the other hand, has come in at 255 pounds, which is probably the heaviest he's... Actually, no, not probably, is the heaviest he's ever been. The second heaviest he was 254 pounds against Carlos Takam, and that ended up being one of his weakest performances. But that was under a different coach, different trainer, so, we have to maybe account for a little bit of that. How do I see this fight going? Okay, so... as I said previously, when Jermaine Franklin fought Dillian Whyte, he's a durable guy. He's got a pretty good chin. I did think that Whyte would get him out of there in maybe the 8th or the 9th round. Yeah, he would work his body and then sort of, take him out to the head. That didn't happen. Jermaine was even more durable than I was expecting him to be. But that was a bigger Jermaine. With a Jermaine that's now lighter, with less shock absorption on his body, the question is, how long can he avoid the big shots for? Or is his plan to tuck up and get AJ to offload and then basically attack him during his moments of recovery? I see it being the case that Anthony Joshua is going to play, I think he's going to play it safe in the first couple of rounds and keep Jermaine at distance. I think he's gonna use his jab. If we remember, he's always said his mantra, as everyone says, right hand will take you around the block, a good jab will take you around the world. So I think he's going to employ that jab, and I actually think he's going to keep his height fairly consistently throughout this fight. I don't think he's really going to hunch over and crouch down to Franklin's level too many occasions, but I think he's going to have that jab in his face, like that ramrod jab in his face. I think he's going to also stab to Jermaine's body to try and test out to see how much, you know, that weight drop has actually taken from him. Jermaine, on the other hand, I can see essentially I think he's going to look to tuck up, and he's going to try to stay on the outside in the first round, the first couple of rounds, just to sort of get a measure, maybe even feel what's coming his way to see if it's something that he thinks he can take, and then maybe try and look for those moments where Anthony Joshua might leave a hand out too far, or take a bit too much time to bring it back, or when he comes back have to reset. And I feel like that's when Jermaine's going to look to try and step in and, you know, basically almost ambush Joshua with maybe 1, 2 or 3 punch combinations, and then try and get back out again before Joshua has a chance to respond. And I think that's the way he's going to look to essentially try and win rounds early, by sort of getting in, getting out, and then staying safe, you know, going around the peripheries, and then sort of rinse and repeat. Obviously staying sharp, staying with the tight defense, trying to use a little bit of head movement to make sure that Joshua doesn't land anything clean. I think this fight gets interesting from about round 3, and that's what I think that Anthony Joshua is now at this point going to decide to stay, rather than sort of stay further back and sort of try and probe and just throw that jab out. I think he's actually going to, at that point, try and step into Jermaine Franklin a bit more and use his physical size and strength. I feel like he's going to, at times, hold and lean on Franklin, very similar to what Tyson Fury does to smaller opponents, you know, sort of tie them up, get them on the inside, push them back, just get those legs working, find some openings on the inside. Joshua tried to do similar tactics to Alexander Usyk in the second fight, and he had minor success from here, you know, at certain points, but Usyk is just obviously knows how to work on the inside, knows how to nullify on the inside, and he was just a bit better at it and knowing how to negate Joshua's tactics. I don't think Franklin is that same way inclined. I think Franklin will try and exchange on the inside, or try and let shots go on the inside, which will play to Joshua's hands, where he'll start sort of trying to dig to the body, you know, walking back, tie up his arms, and just basically take some air out of the tires. And I feel like it's going to be a very close fought battle from rounds 3 up until when this fight ultimately ends. Now, I've put in a prediction saying that Joshua will get the job done between rounds 5 to 8. I am predicting that this fight ends in and around the 7th round. And I feel basically, I don't think Anthony's going to basically overtax himself in the first half of the fight. I feel like he's going to, like I said, he's going to stay safe first couple rounds, you know, maybe keep himself protected. Then he's going to start stepping into his work more from sort of round 3, where, you know, Franklin will have to sort of fight off of him and fight him off. And then Joshua obviously will, like I said, I think he's going to invest to the body. Then I think he's going to start employing the straight right hands down the pipe from about sort of round 4 or 5. Maybe not to the point where he's going to, like, you know, go crazy, but I think that straight right's going to get in there. That left hook is he's gonna find that hook at some point, and knowing Joshua, he's definitely going to be looking for those uppercuts. And Jermaine does roll in a certain way where if Joshua times him correctly, he will be able to catch him with an uppercut. I do think he's going to get Franklin hurt probably round 4 or 5, but Franklin's going to be able to come through that. And then I feel like Joshua's going to slow it down around about the 6th, and then in the 7th he's going to look to close the show. So I am like I said, I'm predicting between sort of rounds 5 to 8, but if you're going to ask me a specific round, I do think he will win this fight via, I don't think it's going to be stoppage, I think it's going to be an actual KO in the 7th round. Again, I don't know if the the weight coming off Franklin is going to be a, you know, something whereby he's not going to be able to absorb shots as much as he usually does. But he's got pretty good powers of recovery. But I just think Joshua, at the size he is at the moment, 255 pounds, I don't think he's going to be he's going to be looking to like set some mad intense pace that is going to have him blowing after like round 3, round 4, and then needing 4 or 5 rounds to get back into it. I think he's going to stay consistent and just stay on the front foot and apply pressure and make Franklin have to move and get tired. And yeah, just because of that, I think that's going to wear him down. A lot of body work, a lot of stiff jabs, and then yeah, those late combinations will sort of start to take place around about, like I said, between rounds 5, 6, and I think ultimately will end sort of in the 7th. But yeah, that's my prediction on that one. Last but not least, on the top rank card, now there's a lot of really good fighters on this card. Tiger Johnson's on there, Jahi Tucker, and then, you know, you've got the main event, which is Robeisy Ramirez versus Isaac Dogboe. Now this one, see, this one for me is a pick 'em fight. I'm not even gonna lie. I feel like Isaac Dogboe is almost discounted in that division just because he's a really short guy. Obviously coming up initially from, what was it, 126, moving up to 130. Like, he looks obviously a lot more stockier and filled out in his current, you know, sort of in his current iteration. And I just feel as if he's got the experience in terms of, you know, just the pro experience, just the grit and the toughness. But Robeisy Ramirez, he's a special fighter, really and truly. Like, 11-1 at the moment, I think, with 7 KOs. He's got the pedigree, he's got the amateur pedigree, whereas Dogboe's got more of the pro experience and has been in there with obviously the highest level operators within the pro division. And without going into too much of a breakdown on this one, because I appreciate this video is probably a lot longer than I actually wanted it to be, I feel as if Ramirez is going to be able to use a lot of his movement and his sharp punching, as well as some counter punching, to basically be able to win the majority of the rounds comfortably. On the judges' scorecards, like, the rounds may be competitive, but they will be, you know, fairly comprehensive of who's won them. And ultimately, I think that Robeisy Ramirez will win this vacant title via a unanimous decision on the cards. But yeah, that's as far as I'm going to leave it there. Apologies, this one's a little different to normal, but I just didn't really have the motivation to talk through all of the cards in their essence. It was just that those 2 fights mainly that I wanted to address. So leave yours in the comment section below. If there's any others you want a prediction on before the fights, just write in the comments and I'll give you my brief summary of how I feel that fight's going to go, and we can kind of take it from there. But thank you very much for watching, and for right now, that's Basis Picks locked.